Hello, I am Jaime Laurence Bonilla Morales, Director of Postgraduate Studies for the Faculty of Theology at the Pontificia Universidad Javeriana. Welcome, everyone. For us, it is essential to create spaces where our postgraduates can share their reflections and experiences because the identity of theology is intertwined with people's lives. Theology as a reflection of God's revelation and people's response of faith throughout history always has the ability to contemplate life, to reflect on human action as a theological place. Today, Ana Maria Gonzalez will share some of her own experiences and reflections. I hope that we can all learn, reflect, and challenge ourselves. Thank you, Ana Maria. We also inform you that we have 50% percent discount codes for registration for those who wish to enroll in our postgraduate programs. Simply mail us at teologia@javeriana.edu.co. And finally, Eduardo Gutierrez, professor in this faculty, is going to lead our event. Thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you, Jaime, so much. Can you hear me and see me well?
Yes.
Amazing, thanks. Right, so greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Eduardo Gutierrez. Like Jaime said, I'm an assistant professor here at the Center for Theological Formation at Pontificia Universidad Javeriana in Bogotá, Colombia. Thank you all for virtually joining us. As we go along, I would say be sure to send us your questions on the comment section of our YouTube channel, as there will be some time for the Q&A before we finish. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Dr. Gonzalez. So Ana Maria, welcome. Ana Maria Gonzalez Angulo is a physician and surgeon from Universidad del Cauca in Popayán, Colombia. She specialized in internal medicine at Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami and in medical oncology at the Ochsner Clinical Foundation in New Orleans and at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston in the US. Her scientific training includes a master's in translational research sciences and a PhD in cancer cell biology and drug development at the University of Texas. She also holds a bachelor's degree in religious studies from our home, Pontificia Universidad Javeriana, in Bogotá, Colombia, as well as a master's in bioethics and a master's in theology from the same university. Her work in medical oncology has focused on breast tumors, with an emphasis on young women with aggressive tumors, cancer during pregnancy, oncogenetics, and the development and execution of clinical trials. Her laboratory research focused on studying mechanisms of therapy resistance and the development of molecular markers in cancer. So without further ado, Ana Maria, a warm and virtual welcome back to Javeriana. We're thrilled to have you here with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the invitation. And as I said, it's always a pleasure to talk to people at home. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. Can everybody see? Okay, so I'm going to speak today about a little book that I wrote a couple years ago that's called Probe Me and explains how physician scientists experiences God. So the goal of the
Ana Maria, before you go on, are you already sharing? Because I can see your face,
yeah,
but I can't see your presentation yet.
Yeah, it says that I'm sharing. I am so sorry. Let me try again.
No worries, no worries.
Share. Okay.
There you go. Awesome.
Okay. Hold tight. Let me. Okay. Sorry about the technical issues.
No problem at all.
Okay. So again, the goal of this talk was to talk a little bit about how this little book came to be. So the name of the book is Probe Me, and talks a little bit about how a physician scientist like me experiences God. We're going to talk about how the idea of this book started and how there's a little bit more to the story, how the book came to be, some thoughts about science and religion, a little bit about my religious experience, or what the religious experience is, how to experience God in science, a couple of autobiographies and religious experiences from a couple of people that are important to me, and then we're going to review some of the content of the book. So how everything started. As Eduardo already said, I'm a medical doctor specializing in internal medicine and medical oncologist, and I have a master's in translational research and a PhD in cancer cell biology and drug development. So how all this started was because in the laboratory, I started to use a technology that is called CRISPR-Cas9, that basically is a very easy way to edit our genome and DNA. And so I started to think about, okay, all this progress is very good, but how are we going to control this progress? So how are we going to, and where do we draw the line and stop kind of like start playing God? So I like this quote from Proverbs 1:7 that says, the fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. So the origin of the book is really the thesis that I wrote for my bachelor's in religious sciences. But there is more to this story. So I used to work at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, which is the largest and probably #1 cancer center in the world, where I run a research lab and I treated patients with basically with breast cancer. Yeah, but life changes, and from the top notch of academic life, I ended up in a medical facility of a state prison in Texas, and it was thanks to the 3 persons that you see there that probably are well known to all the people at the university, that I had the opportunity of develop in humanities in order to get to the story of bioethics and how to understand bioethics from both sides of the pond, because I had all the training for being a physician and a scientist, but I didn't have any training in humanities. So thanks to Father Munera, I started my training in religious sciences while I was inside. And if you look at the abstract of my religious sciences thesis, we follow a methodological design, and through the autobiographical essay of religious experience, I wrote the book. So we follow, a general research frame. We look at theoretical fundamentals in religious experience and how to experience God in sciences, and how autobiography and religious experience can meet. Then we follow methodology, and let me tell you, for someone that is a scientist and that has like a very square way of thinking, using qualitative research is not easy. So we follow the methodology and end up with these autobiographic essays that are the basis for the book. So some thoughts about the subject of science and religion. So one of the deepest human motivations is the desire to answer these fundamental questions. And in order to answer that, you require both a spiritual and a scientific perspective to be able to understand what we can see and what we cannot see. So both believer and scientists, we all share this intellectual need to find and to search for the truth. The interesting thing is that we live in a world that is full of contradictions, and we're overwhelmed with all the information that is available. And if we look, 45% of the population of the most scientifically advanced country, which is the United States, rejects the theory of evolution. However, they all accept the use of all technological and scientific advancements to improve their lifestyles and to prevent or treat illnesses. So scientists and theologians tend to avoid delving into matters that overlap between the respective fields, while they assert and elaborate in their own fields. So I like to think about my doubts, and I always think about this verse of Mark 9:24 that says, I believe, Lord, help my unbelief. St. Augustine, 1700 years ago, wrote at least 5 extensive analyses of Genesis 1 and 2. And these ideas are still relevant today. But what is most interesting is in his inquiry into the meaning of time, he concludes that God exists outside time. And he writes, what kind of days these were is extremely difficult or perhaps impossible to conceive. So Vatican II encourages methodological research in all disciplines. It says that secular realities and the realities of faith have their origin in the same God. And if we look at the slide, there's a picture of Theodosius Dobzhansky, who was a phenomenal biologist, and he, but also was a very, it was a practicing Orthodox Christian, and he said that nothing in biology made sense except in the light of evolution. And I put a picture there of Buzz Aldrin because there is a very interesting story behind him. When they landed in the moon, he actually took with him the Holy Eucharist and he took communion in the moon. But this was never publicized because years before, when the Apollo program started and they circumvented the Earth, the astronauts read from Genesis. And there were several people that actually filed a lawsuit against NASA because they couldn't believe that they were using religion in a public entity in the United States. So our scientific practices are effective in cultivating our religious experience. In the clinics, we really enact like in a church. In the research lab can be our chapel where we literally touch God. It's amazing to see how life happens, how a cell divides. And responsible teaching is also a form of apostolate. So science has never been a threat to God. We believe and we know that he gave it to us. I think this essay that is called Experienciar a Dios from Leonardo Bob is one of the most amazing descriptions of religious experience. And when he goes into religious experience through science, he said that the question of the meaning of life is already implicit in science and technology. And what sense does humanity seek to realize when engaging the technical world? And he says that the analysis of these inquiries help us to arrive to the original sense of God, because he is the one that provides all what we have in the modern world. And if we go to the scientist of the scientists, which is Albert Einstein, he also said that he maintains that the cosmic religious fundamentals are the strongest and novel motives for scientific research. As a matter of fact, he says that the way that scientists undertake their science or their research is, after all, removed from that realities of life that come from God. So when I looked into the research project that ended up being the thesis of this bachelor's degree, I looked into a couple of autobiographies of religious experiences of 2 people. One that is not very familiar to theologians, that is Francis Collins. Francis Collins was he was the head of the Human Genome Project. And he was raised in an atheist family. And it was when he actually encountered in medical school a patient that was nearly dying, and she was in peace, that he started questioning why this person was in peace. And there's a quote that I love from him, because he said that there it was with a mix of willful blindness and something that can only be described as arrogance, avoiding any serious consideration that God could be a real possibility. It turns out that that encounter with that patient started him studying and looking seriously into the fact that, God existed. And at the end, he wrote a phenomenal book that's called The Language of God after he published the findings of the Human Genome Project. And he says that the God of the Bible is also the God of the genome, that he can be worshipped in the cathedral or in the laboratory, that his creation is majestic, marvelous, intriguing, and beautiful, and it cannot be at war with itself. And then the second autobiography that I looked is something that is someone that is very, close and dear to the Jesuits. It was Father Pedro Arrupe. If you guys know, he was actually studying to become a doctor. He was studying medicine in Spain. And his story is actually very, very interesting. He was in key places in the world when many things happened. But what changed his mind was that he was in Lourdes and he witnessed a miracle. And he said that the books slipped from his hands, that the lessons, the experiments that had once thrilled him now felt empty, that he was bewildered by a memory that affected him more than each day, the image of the sacred host lifted in blessing and the paralyzed child leaping from his chair, remaining fixed in his memory and in his heart. And he left medical school and, became the person that he was. But he also survived many places. He was in Hiroshima when the atomic bomb exploded. And he was put in prisons a few months before in Japan. So his experience is a little different, but he started in the same path that some of us started with science. So I like to sort of conclude this little part with this quote from Robert Jastrom. When he wrote a book that is called God and the Astronomers. And basically what he makes fun is that it seems that we all scientists fight and work really hard to find the truth. And at the end, we climb the highest of the peaks to find a bunch of theologians that are already been there for centuries knowing the right answers. So this is how ProfMe started. So I dedicated this book to my God because he is everything in my life and give me a lot of reasons to be grateful to him. And those reasons were the extraordinary family who taught me how to discover him, my friends and family, the family that I chose that have taught me how to love, patients that are the best teachers of hope, and the community of St. Joseph de Tarbes and the Society of Jesus that have taught me faith. The reason because the book is called ProfMe is because I used Psalm 139 to go through different experiences in life. So the book starts with, Lord, you have proved me, you know me. You know when I sit and when I stand. You understand my thoughts from afar. You sift through my travels and my rest. With all my ways, you're familiar. Even before a word is in my tongue, Lord, you know it all, behind and before you. Encircle me and rest your hand upon me, and such a knowledge is too wonderful to me, for too lofty to me to reach. I also started the book with a quote from Stefan Zweig, and what I like from the world of yesterdays is how he said that our memories are there with us, but we really choose what memories to put in our lives. So let our memories to speak, and the ones that we choose to be the reflection of the life before we're gone. The book is divided in 3 parts. The first part talks about my beginnings of religious experience, and I use this part of the psalm. You formed me in my inmost being. You knit me in my mother's womb. Your eyes saw me in form, and your book are written down. My days were shaped before one came to be. So the religious experience is an experience that I don't even remember. I had a nanny who was my mother's nanny that we called Mama. And one day when I was really little, I probably have a month or 2, my mom told her to take me to the sanctuary of the Infant of Prague. In my hometown in Popoyan, there is a sanctuary from the Infant of Prague, and there are cluster nuns that are Carmelites that run the sanctuary. So away Mama took me, and when we arrived, the Carmelites, the nun that took care of us said that she wanted to see the baby. And Mama put me in that contraption that is called a torno in cloister nuns. And so I went inside the cloister and I came out with the image of that of the Infant of Prague. And 50 years later, that icon or even a printed image of the Infant of Prague continues to be in my nightstand. No matter the place in the world that I live or visit, he's always there next to me, even if from time to time I forget that he's there. So the second part is that I always wanted to be a physician. It's like, if you ask me when did I realize that I wanted to be a doctor, I just don't remember. I spent summers in our ranch in Patia, where all our games circle around being a doctor or being a healer. And I actually remember how my best friend and I would put together like a first aid kit and play and, took care of the people when they had like little accidents or little things. Then the real experience was when I spent Christmas vacation in another part with my maternal uncles, because a lot of them are physicians or were physicians. And we had the opportunity to see how they took care of people, how the people will come and they will help them. And if there was somebody that was so sick, they will, make sure that they have transportation and send them to the hospital. And a lot of us actually cousins, because you can see their pictures of 5 of my other cousins that are physicians. We learn from that not only the fact that of being a doctor, but also treating patients or treating people with compassion, no matter how rich or how poor they were. The other thing that I did was, like, I started my elementary school years with the Sister of St. Joseph the Tarbes, and they were very, very encouraging. The picture that you see there of that nun she was my kindergarten teacher, and she was just condecorated because she's been teaching kindergarten for more than 70 years. So with time, I learned that the gifts and calls came from God and they are irrevocable. And that both my parents and teachers were essential, not only to recognize them, but to cultivate them and to understand the responsibility associated with them. So how is to grow up in Popayan? Popayan is an interesting place to grow up because it's a very Catholic place and there's a lot of traditions. So we grew up with the culture of Papa Dios, y Mama Linda, y Papa Lindo. And that was sort of the way that we were taught to call, the Father, our Lady Mother, and actually Jesus. We also grew up with these Holy Week traditions that are more than familiar, and also with religious music festivals. So now, each time that I go home, I have this feeling of peace and unity. And I remember my grandfather kneeling before his beloved amo, which is the image of the ex homo. And now I see my brother doing exactly the same, going under the barrote to carry these pasos during the nights. And now I see my little nephews doing the same and doing the same in school. So that actually is a different way of experiencing God, but it's also a different way of experiencing it in the community. So I always wanted to be an oncologist, and this vocation started when one of my dearest aunts was diagnosed with lung cancer when she was in her early 30s. But what was interesting was that was at the same time that a big earthquake hit our hometown. So there was a lot of stress in my family, not only because of the earthquake, but because of my aunt's disease. And one day I was visiting her next to where you are in the hospital in San Ignacio. And my Uncle Mario, her brother, showed me an example of being a physician that was fantastic. He was taking care of my aunt, and he was so tender in the way that he was treating her and examining her. But what was actually more interesting was that when I went and accompanied him to see some other patients, I saw that same tenderness, and I saw the eyes of hope or the eyes of kindness of those patients towards him. So at the end of the day, I decided that I wanted to be a physician, but I wanted to be an oncologist like my uncle was. So every physician receives an unimaginable level of trust from his patients or her patients and from their families. And it's a great responsibility because at the end, we must understand that Jesus Christ is present in each of them, and that both patient and physicians must surrender themselves to the will of God. So how sciences and mathematics trumped humanities? When I started middle and high school years, I started to fall in love with philosophy too, and with history and literature. We had also the visit of Pope John Paul II that shows a lot of social conscience. I don't know if some of you remember, some of you that are old enough remember how during his visit in Popayan, there was an indigenous person that was speaking to him, and he was interrupted. And the Pope actually stopped the organizer and told him to let him speak. We also learned this social conscience from the nuns that we work with, because we ended up going to the slums of Popayan and did some voluntary work with him. The other thing that I learned in school was that we develop friendships that last forever. As a matter of fact, I was with my friends from a school about 2 months ago, and we're the same. And re-encountered friends that you haven't seen in 20 years and feeling that you just saw them yesterday is very valuable. So through my school years, my deep desire of becoming a physician never won. On the contrary, it only increased with every chemical reaction and with every physics equation. I've never stopped reading history, philosophy, and literature, but it's my love for science and medicine and the sensation and awe that of understanding a mechanism of when I discover something or when a patient is healed that makes me feel closer to God. So the second part of the book is the preparation, how I ended up being where I am. So how precious to me are you, the signs of God? How vast the sum of them? Where I counted, they will outnumber the sounds. Where I completed, I still you are with me. So I went to medical school in a public university. I went to Universidad del Cauca. I learned basic clinical sciences, but I also learned the responsibility of wearing a lab coat, from the white coat that you wear in the anatomy lab, and the respect that you have to have for those bodies of people that are giving us their bodies to learn. The importance of that Hippocratic oath and all what we say when it's that. And then the friendships that, grow during those hard times and those very long nights when you're on call. So in the theology of healing, Christ is our model to follow, and his dual role as a divine physician, but also as an archetype of the patient that is suffering. And it is paramount that us as physicians meditate about both of those roles to be able to understand the perspective and the responsibility of the gift of healing. Santa Teresa of Calcutta said it the best way: blessed are you who touch the body of Christ 24 hours a day. So this is the story of one of the toughest days of my life, if not the hardest one. And this is the day that my heart broke. When I grew up with two little brothers that were twins. And one of my brother, Nicholas, had a girlfriend that just had left to be in a foreign exchange student program, and he was very upset. So I took him to the hospital to see a little patient that I had that had leukemia and was actively dying. And I say, go look what real suffering means, and stop complaining about trivial things. Well, it turned out that we had an event in the ranch, and a few days later, my other brother, Alejandro, calls, and we found out that he's paralyzed, or he's getting paralyzed, and he has something that is called Guillain-Barré. Well, when he was getting better, Nicolas was going to the hospital to attend him, and got killed in a car accident. So I remember that day like it was yesterday, and I could tell you every single detail of what happened. But one of the things that stick with me was the solidarity of the people. So any tragedy is able to destroy our present, but it can either, improve our future. It's our choice to survive the event and to become better. So, remember what Nietzsche say, what does not kill me makes me strong. So it is our choice to appreciate and to be grateful for what life offers every day, and to develop new relationships, to strengthen the ones that we already have. And it's our choice to find purpose in life. Every man is confounded with the chance to achieve something through his own suffering. Well, when we finish medical school in all Latin America, we have to give up this year that's called the social service year. And it's actually one of the best years if you ask any of us that have gone through it. So I have kind of an interesting year because before social service during internship, the Tierra Adentro earthquake happened. And we were mandated to go to that area and work with the populations there and related to the shamans, and had unbelievable experience with the people there. So my social service here was mainly in Popayán, but also in regions like Patia or Hambalo, which is Indian. It's an Indian population during cholera outbreaks. But I also saw the horror of war. And you meet patients that you never forget. I'll never forget the guy that I treated for hypertension that will come with, warm bread every day to the health science center. And also that gratefulness to people. So that reminds me of this quote of Etzioni that says that the poor are the best customers because God will be their paymaster. And that's the way they bless you, because every time you treat somebody, they always tell you, God will repay you, doc. Dios se lo pague. Later on, I moved to the United States and I did my internal medicine training at Mount Sinai Medical Center at Jackson Memorial Hospital. So in Mount Sinai, I actually had that shock reality of meeting Holocaust survivors. There was one day that I was admitting a patient and I went to simply take her pulse and I saw the tattoo and it shocked me. And then she was very nice. After I finished, I went to kind of like round my patients and see how she was doing. And she sat with me and told me her story. And that was like the first time that I actually saw the reality of what the Holocaust was. But I also trained at Jackson Memorial Hospital. And Jackson was the county hospital, the public hospital in Miami. And there was a refugee crisis at the time with Haitian refugees, and all of them came with full-blown AIDS. But what was most interesting about this was not the amount of patients and the science that we learned from that AIDS. What I loved was to see that these people were alone. However, the nurses and the people from the hospital would keep them company. We treat them with compassion at the time that every person that had AIDS was rejected. So besides that, I learned diversity and tolerance. When you go on training in the United States, you meet people from all over the world and all over and different backgrounds and religions. The last thing that I learned from these people was mentorship. It was true mentorship. In your training in the States, they assign you a person to be your mentor and guide you in your academic development. And they do truly care about you. So with this experience as an adult, I truly believe that all of us have our own personal relationship with God, and that we should enjoy such a relationship in a way that makes us comfortable to growing. God is only real and significant to man. He emerges from our experiences of the world and our experiences with others, no matter what kind of religious practices they have. And I always remember, because I went to a Jewish hospital, this Maimonides prayer about mentorship. And he said, should those who are wiser than I wish to instruct me, let my soul be grateful for their guidance. So after all those years, I finally end up doing what I wanted, which was oncology. I moved to New Orleans and I went to the Ochsner Clinic Foundation. But I not only learned oncology, but I also learned enology. New Orleans is a very interesting place in the United States. And I will say that it's probably the one city that's totally different in the United States. So I have two phenomenal teachers and mentors that not only taught me oncology, but taught me about wine and about food. Besides that, I went to the lab and I fell in love with basic sciences. I also learned the complexity and teamwork that you have to do to treat cancer. But one of the most amazing things in New Orleans is that you learn how to break bread with your friends. So our steps toward God also serve us as our step to sciences. So we need to understand that God is not a phenomenon, and that we have to be honest with ourselves, because science merged from that mystery that God is, and we have to recognize that the source of our knowledge appears when we understand His presence in our science. So how can I end up practice medicine after all these years of training? So where can I go from your spirit, from your presence? Where can I flee? If I ascend to the heavens, you're there. If I lay down in Sheol, you're there. Even though your hand guides me, your right hand holds me fast. So after I finished my training in Oxnard, I went to Houston and I went to MD Anderson Cancer Center. I became a breast medical oncologist, and I joined the Department of Systems Biology. I ended up doing my Master in Sciences and my PhD. And because I like problems, which means difficult patients, I enjoy building a clinic with things that a lot of people have no pleasure in seeing, but I actually find interesting and grateful. But I always witness some impossible cures. The picture that you see in the middle is a patient that was 26 when I saw her, and her cancer had come back after less than 6 months of her treatment. Physicians told them that she had less than 6 months to live. Well, we used our heads and treated the way we thought it was best for her, and that was almost 20 years ago when she's alive and doing well. So sometimes we're able to cure the incurable, but it's not that we cure the incurable, it's that God give us the tools to investigate that natural world. And through that we are able to, get those results. But the interesting thing is that the scientific method is not enough to explain all the important questions or the ultimate reasons of life. So science are not the only source to knowledge. Spirituality is also another part of the truth. I remember vividly the day that I saw that patient for the first time, and how the mom was crying, and she said, "What do we do?" And I honestly told them, "Pray." So Einstein said that science without religion is paralyzed, and religion without science is blind. So this is another personal experience that goes through it, and is the marriage that failed. So I cultivated this friendship and fellowship with my ex-husband, and we practically grew up together. I started dating him when I was 16 years old, and we dated for about 10 years, and we're married for more than 12. But we experienced both the emptiness of infertility, and then I started to kind of reflect in the inner conflict and how, our marriage was done for the wrong reasons. I went through counseling, and finally, the church was able to give us an annulment of the marriage. But one of the best reflections that I have is that anyone who had to weigh up a vocation against the benefit of a family, or the value of a vision of a future against the demanding realities of the present, could understand my personal dilemmas and my struggles at the time when I chose to get married. But the experience of loss should not leave us with the memory of a painful event that stands alone. It should also leave us with the memories of the good times that we share. So today, after all this year, there's no longer pain or resentfulness, and we're good friends and have the certainty that if we need each other, we're there for each other. So the privilege of teaching. Training is part of human growth, and we grew when we train our students and we help them grow. And there are existential moments when we teach these people. When they're physicians, we have to teach them the humanity of the profession. Not everything is science and evidence-based medicine. And we also like to teach I also like to teach the impact of the basic sciences having in humans. So I used to take, for example, my PhD students from the lab to my clinic, so they understand why we were doing the experiments that would take, to the development of a new medication that was going to help a patient. I also thought it was important for them to say goodbye And, to reflect on who is the teacher of healing, and that's Jesus Christ. So for me, in order for training to be integral, we have to teach our students to build a complex knowledge, not only of sciences, but also of humanity. We have to teach them from our experience, from the humanity of our patients. Our lab members should understand, should understand what they do and what their dreams are. We have to, for training to be structured, we have to be able to understand that it's not only academic and professional development, but that experience have to be meaningful and they have to develop into good human beings. So the world where we live, when you work in an academic institution, you have that privilege of being invited all over the world to lecture. And one of the most amazing things is hospitality. And hospitality in a lot of countries have to do with food. These people feed you to death. But we also learn about the socioeconomical gaps that some of these countries have. I currently live in Mexico, and I can compare the medicine here with what we saw in Vietnam or Thailand. And but it's important also to see how physicians that work with these limited resources, they give everything they have for the good of their patients. And these trips actually go beyond teaching, because we usually help them also to develop their cancer programs and to use the resources the best way they can. But I also learn a lot about a lot of cultural and religious traditions and how they confront these things. So the Christian message makes us active participants of the construction of the world and drive us to be concerned about our fellow citizens on the same world. I work with all the resources that I have, and I saw physicians working with nothing. We discover God by analyzing human existence. In this world, God is veiled. Sometimes he's forgotten. Sometimes he's silenced, but he's present and he strengthens and the life of our wishes to know and to be able to act. So what happens when your loved ones becomes your patients? Each of those people that you see in that pictures are family members or friends that I treated, or one of my family members that are physician treated for cancer. So human love is a revelation. We love our family, we love our friends. And treating cancer patients is a privilege. These patients not only are strong, but they bring you hope, and they teach you a lot. Growing up in a family of physicians is a little difficult because, we all have an opinion and we're very opinionated. But it's also difficult to treat your loved ones because sometimes it's hard to keep clinical judgments, and hard conversations are harder. So every patient is a life lesson. But when our relationship with a patient is very close and our science of medicine is not enough to heal them or to stop their suffering, that crack that opens in our heart is bigger and deeper when we care about these people more than usual. So about these people, I'm actually very grateful to a lot of colleagues that throughout the years have taken care and still take care of some of my family members and friends, because they're generous with their time and knowledge, they're compassionate, and they love them, and they're incredibly patient when I have concerns and I give suggestions. So the last part is the change of plans in my life. Darkness is no dark for you, and night shines today. Darkness is a light. Darkness and light are but one. I praise you because I am wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My very self, my bones are not hidden from you. When I was being made in secret, fashioned in the deep of the earth. So time out. In this little essay in my book, I talk about the sin of pride and how the sin of pride, was my fault. But once I arrived to that prison and as a medical facility, I saw what the human tragedy is in that place. I met a breast cancer, inmate patient that wanted to create a cancer support group. But with the help of a pastor, we actually developed the first and only cancer support group in the criminal system in the United States. So even though you're in places that you feel that you cannot do a lot, there are actions that actually redeem. I learned a lot from others, and I learned the meaning of freedom. So Nelson Mandela has a quote that is very important, and it says that no one does not truly their own country until they have been inside its jails, and a nation should not be judged by how they treat the highest citizens, but the lowest ones. So I can tell you that during my experience there were contexts, there was a lot of confusion, there was a lot of frustration, there was a lot of self-hatred. But then I realized that brokenness are what make us human, no evil. And it comes to a point that I stopped, looking at people like me and them, and I became one of them. And I was proud that, see my brokenness as a product of, that one creator and as a victim of our own will. So what did I lose? Because I lost a lot. So when I talk about loss, I like to say that loss is an experience. And catastrophic loss happens to everybody. We lose people that we love, but, losing your life work is also a catastrophic loss. Jerry Sittser described catastrophic loss like an amputation. Say that, when you get a limb amputated, you recover, you do physical therapy, you get a prosthesis, but the sensation of loss always is going to be there. So I also realized that I was not the only person that lost. My family lost, my friends lost, my patients lost. I had to accept new normals. One of those new normals was that I was not able to see my father again because, he died during pandemic and I was inside. But I also learned forgiving. So the losses for me were huge. As I say, I lost my life's dream, a career of discovering, teaching, traveling, caring for complex patients. I lost relationships for people that I love and respect, patients, colleagues, students, mentors. I lost my reputation and I lost my freedom. It was what they call a damnatic memoria. But loss created a better present, and the losses changed my life. And they set me in a journey that I had to travel even I didn't want it. This quote of Frederick Buechner, it kind of like hits the point here, because even the saddest things can become, once we have made peace with them, a source of wisdom and strength for the journey that still lies ahead. So you gain things, right? So I gained things and I found some silver linings. I found a strong family and how, amazing my family is. I discovered who were my unconditional friends. I found good people that were caught in a bad situation, but they were amazing human beings. I learned that the ultimate choice of how to deal with gain and loss was mine. I learned this, I met these people that are called pen pals, which are people that actually write to people that are in prison. And I found this kid that was in high school when I met her, and today is finishing her PhD and considers me one of her mentors. I met people that are volunteers in prison that are amazing and generous with their time. As a matter of fact, my Catholic deacon was the person that went and picked me up with his wife when I was released. And I also got a new relationship with God. So when we lose, we have the choice to pay attention what we have lost, or to pay attention to what we still have and what we will gain. When we lose, we also gain. I lost the life that I loved, but I gained the truth. The true appraisals of my relationships with family and friends, the true call not only as a physician, but as a human being, and the meaning of gratefulness and forgiveness. I met people I will never have met, and I became familiar with issues that I did not existed. And as my dad said, I grew up in God. So when I was inside, somebody sent me this book that is called A Wounded Healer by Irene Nguyen. And I learned that, the people that are in prison are the lepers of today. They are rejected, they are judged, they are misjudged, they are treated poorly. But I also have to deal with a lot of frustration and helplessness, because when you're a good physician and you're inside a prison and in a medical unit, you see people that are being mistreated, that are not getting the right treatments, that are, and you see people died out of, neglect. So you go back and start thinking about those teachings from your old teachers and from my uncles. Treat the person, not the disease. So I learned that giving hope and caring for the little ones was important. And I also learned communion with pain and suffering. That amazing British poet, John Keats, says, "Do you not see how necessary a word of pain and suffering is to school an intelligence and make a soul?" So in my years of imprisonment, I learned that, there are wounds that are unavoidable, but that my misery is optional. That my helplessness and my pain, as if I use them well, they have a sense of meaning. I also started remembering, like, that I used to work in the best cancer hospital in the world, and some days I had nothing to give to these patients but just my presence and my support and my compassion. So I learned that I was able to give these to these people, and there was something that I could do and make them feel better. Life joins people without asking for their permission is a way that I like to describe my meeting with Shannon McGraw. She went as a volunteer to prison, and she taught me about deliverance prayer of being human. She has a very tough story, and you can read it in one of her books. But she also told me that God's love is complete. So she did deliverance prayer with me, and it was liberating after the experience of being unbound at the spot, despite all the hard memories that I had to go through. I feel like, there had been a spiritual battle that had been fought for a long time, and I was finally released. And with that new experience of freedom, I was able to, help people better. And I also learned that that life is about fulfilling my dreams, and that being more important than a life full of regrets, because true joy only comes from God. So the last part for me was going back to humanities. So we go back to this idea of solving the big questions, and, to have a scientific and a spiritual answers, and understanding the other side of the story. So that's when I decided to do the bachelor's in religious sciences, and then I did a master's in bioethics and a master's in theology. And if you look at the series of books that are in the left hand side, you realize that I actually went through in my theology master's. I decided to study compare religions and how they look at death and afterlife, because I lived that. I had the opportunity of treating patients or help patients die that belong to different cultures and religions. And I realized that I needed to learn that to make them feel better and be respectful. So even when I cannot let go of the convictions and I have not figured out what life expects of me yet, I believe in that there is an all-powerful, all-good creator, and he tells me that my life is worth it, that my failures are not fatal, and that death is not final. So this is the end, no? And I like to end with some, scientific and philosophy quotes. And this is actually from one of your theology teachers, from Father Alberto Parra. He said that if science were to shape religious, pastoral, and theological discourse, and theology succeeded in being the faith-based reading of scientific knowledge, then we could begin to glimpse the end of the regrettable bilingualism that today manifests of a person with schizophrenia, a science without faith and a faith without science. And I like to finish with these two quotes about what, my life journey has been. And one is from Jung that says that I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. And the other one is from Dickens that said that I have been bent and broken, and I hope that into a better shape. So the end of the psalm is, probe me, God, know my heart, try me, know my thought. See if there is a wicked path in me, lead me along an ancient path. Finally, I'd just like to acknowledge the people that help with all this. So, Father Remolina, we all miss him. Father Munera, who had been my mentor and spiritual advisor. Father Duran, who had the idea of, sending me all the materials and be able to get these degrees. Father Pelaez, who was very generous in giving me the opportunity to study. Alex, who helped with the editing of the book, and my mentor for the thesis that became the book, Jeffrey. In the other side, you see Jenny Chan that wrote she's a physician scientist and the director of the Methodist Cancer Center, who wrote the introduction for the book. My friend Laritza Rodriguez and my aunt Lula Angulo, who type, because I wrote all these theses and everything that you see there with a pencil in paper, because we had no access to computers or internet there. So they actually type and help me doing all the research. Sharon and my friends, Maria Camila and Nigel, that were the first editors. And of course, Jesus Christ, because your love continues to save my life and my integrity. And it's my life is a testament of your mercy. And I ask him every day to continue to walk by my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana Maria. Wow, that was definitely a rich and thought-provoking talk. So many things come to mind. So thank you for sharing both your professional itinerary and your own, let's say, personal spiritual experience. I firmly believe that magic happens, and a deeper form of learning is sort of enabled when scholars have the courage to share their own, like their overall human experience and how it contextualizes and nurtures their work. So thank you for that. Gosh, thank you for having an acute curiosity, right? And allowing those various voices. I mean, you mentioned family, voices of cultural life in Popayan, your studies, imprisoned voices, right? To speak to you not as like siloed voices, but as a choir. Like there's harmony there and it's beautiful. And then finally, thank you for taking the time to write the book. I mean, you're weaving your own experiences into a story, and you benefited yourself from several autobiographical accounts, right? So I'm sure many will benefit from reading about you and your own journey. So I'm mindful of the time, but I suggest we take like at least 5 minutes. There's 2 questions that I'd like to pose. One is from Anderson Santos from our own faculty. He says, why he sends his heartfelt thank you and gratitude. And he says, he's asking, why is it so difficult for the academic world to articulate lived experiences in simple, common, and accessible language? So that would be question number 1. And then maybe my own question would be maybe 2 things. One would be, it seems to me that both science and religion in your account play different roles, and yet they again, they're the like voices of a choir. How do you, let's say, how do you distinguish the kind of questions that one or the other discipline sort of best responds to? That might be question number 1. And then the second one, you've already mentioned your studies in humanities, right? But I'm curious, how have the fact that you studied in Javeriana or the fact that you're a Colombian, those 2 things, how do you feel like they might have contributed to your overall, right, like professional experience? Has it played for or against you? And that's it. I think that we don't have more time for any more questions. I'll leave it there.
So let's see if I can recap a little bit. So I think that when we go through our professional lives and we speak a certain language, then it's kind of like hard to, go down and articulate ourselves into the normal language. And that happens with physicians and scientists a lot. One of the best tools that we have is when we do research, we have to write informed consents for the patients that participate in research. And we have to write it at the 7th grade level. So that actually grounds people and help us doing that. But I also think that we have to adapt our communication with the people that we're interacting with. It's not the same to interact with a colleague physician scientist that interact with a patient, right? Or it's not the same to you as a philosopher interact with a scientist like me, right? It's like we manage different languages and lexicons. But at the end, everything merges. So regarding your first question, how do I answer questions for one or the other side, like for humanities or for science? I think that for me, science is a lot easier because I guess it's the way my brain is wired. I think that science is precise, although not everything is perfect, is precise, and we have, systematic methods to kind of studies and do things step by step. I think that humanities are a lot harder because we have to go beyond the preciseness of science. But there is a point that things merge, because when you discover or you realize something, or you figure things out in science, you say, there are a lot of things that you say, like, only the divine can build such perfection. And just by looking at how a simple cell works, it's just amazing. So it comes to a point that things merge. And the last question is, how do I feel? Like, I think that growing up, every experience in life shape you. And I think that growing up in Popayán, going to the school that I went, having this very close relationship with the Jesuits, and at the same time, growing up in a family full of physicians and scientists, make me who I am. Yeah, I went and I searched for scholarity in other places because what I wanted to do. But I think that at the end of the day, who you are is who you grow up with and where you grow up with. And I grew up down there.
Thank you so much, Ana Maria. There might be other questions, but I think we need to get to a close. But again, once again, thank you so much. I just asked, we had like over 30 people log on, so we had an interesting audience from different countries, from different places, and I'm sure it's been wonderful and fruitful for all of us. So once again, thank you. Congratulations on that book. I can't wait to read it, and hopefully see you soon. I hope you're visiting us in Javeriana soon.
I'll give it a try.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to everybody who enabled this talk at the Faculty of Theology. Thank you, William, for helping us here. Thank you for Jaime for inviting us both, Ana Maria and myself. And to all, a good evening or